Welcome to the Future of Tourism podcast. I'm David Peacock.
Stop owning your own content.
Young leaders are stepping up.
Bring everyone to the table
and imagine their world anew.
In 2016, Phil Xiang co-wrote a prescient academic paper on the then emerging concept of smart tourism. Today, Phil Xiang is the head of the Fiertrig Department of Hospitality at Virginia Tech and a leader in the field of information technologies for the tourism and hospitality industry. Jason Swick is a friend and peer at Simpleview, where he is VP of Strategy and Insights. When it comes to keeping up with the industry, it's on Jason's radar, and more than likely he's published on the subject. So, in an interconnected world that is rapidly getting even more so, where are we now as places and destinations? Where are we going? And what does it mean for the relationship between the destination and the destination organization? Good morning, Phil. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, David. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning to the both of you.
Phil, how are you? Where are you? What's it like?
I'm fine, thank you. David, this is the fourth week of our semester, so we just got started, and this is a very exciting semester. There's a lot going on, but for me, I'm trying to stay, maybe to put it that way, trying to be smart.
You're pacing yourself. Jason, how are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Yeah. Hey, listen, good. Thank you, David. And Phil, good seeing you again as well. It's interesting to be on this side of the mic now, Dave, right? Totally. So it's great. Yeah, things are good. Still sunny, hot Arizona, as you know already. We're starting to get into the fall, which is nice, but excited to be here. And thanks for having me.
Well, thanks both for coming. Phil, I was reading a paper here. As this sort of all started back, I was reading a 2016 paper. You were writing about smart cities, and you were talking about the emergence, in particular in your field, smart tourism, and that interconnectivity. The part that really got me was you had this statement, the fabric of the industry is yet changed again, and the ways in which tourism experiences are created, exchanged, consumed, and shared are fundamentally different. You could take that statement, you could say, wow, Phil must have been talking about disruption, but it was the second set of disruption. It was the information interconnectivity part where you saw that really coming home to roost. And so you and your team in that paper postulated a foundation to build a smart tourism. So tell us your 2016 definition of smart tourism.
Thank you, David. Yeah, this is a paper I co-authored with a few colleagues. There were not some of them are actually in Australia, in South Korea, and one of them was in the US. We started by looking at the technological foundation for tourism, and we came to a realization that there's something interesting going on, which was quite different from the early days when we say, okay, there's a so-called the movement of e-tourism, right? It's digital tourism, but which focused on the representation of the destinations, tourism on the internet, right? This is pretty much it. And 2016, we reflected on what the technological development in the past several years, including the iPhone, social media, Internet of the Things, when we say, okay, this is something different, right? In the sense that, we have technology that really bridges, the digital and the physical spaces, right? We have technology now can enable us to have real-time data, right? Which was not impossible in the past.
So, and in real-time data, just to put a pin in it, to give people some context, in 2016, in the paper you actually cite this, was akin to buses showing up at bus stops in Barcelona with digital readouts and timing. That was an early integration of what we call Internet of Things and the interconnectivity of data at a civic and tourism level.
That's a good point. Yeah, it happened in many ways, right? That's a good example. And we have live camera, we have social media, real-time data, right? That kind of stuff, right? So that's something interesting. And we look at the industry, and used to be it used to be like from the value creation point of view, it used to be linear, and now we're seeing the more network structure, right? But it still consisted of B2C, B2B, that kind of structure. But now we're seeing more of the public, private, and consumer. So there's kind of the triangle in terms of the collaboration, in terms of how they contribute to this tourism experience. So that's what we were at the point of 2016, and say, okay, this is something interesting. We want to spread it out for everyone. So that's why we came up with the kind of the definition. Smart tourism is really based on a new technological infrastructure, which has focused on collaboration, and of course now we're seeing more and more movement towards sustainability, well-being, that kind of stuff.
Okay, and so essentially, to the sort of core of it, you had a working definition of smart tourism. The definition stands then. It's an interconnectivity of data, places, and activities. What's changed is what the activities and the focus are.
Yes, I think the infrastructure still serves the different layers of smart tourism, right?
Mm-hmm.
We argue in the paper that the three layers. One is experience layer, and there's the business layer. We call it the business ecosystem, and then there's the destination management layer. That's the kind of looking at destination as the whole. The structure kind of remains pretty much the same, but the fabrics, what drives those things, are quite different now.
Wow, thanks. And Jason, that sort of leads me into to you, 2015, 2016. You were actually, I think you were director of marketing at Simpleview.
That time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you've been through a progression. On the other side, Phil, Jason lives at the forefront of the destination level. So what did disruption look like? I think it would be fair to say Jason Swick cut his teeth on disruption in tourism. So, but the second wave of information disruption, that's your purview now in your strategy position, Jason. 2016, where were we in terms of that data use?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And I think, smart tourism also means smart marketing, right? At the same time, if we talk about that, it certainly has a role to play in that. Spoke of that.
And I think arguably in 2016, it was probably the dominant role for destinations.
Oh, there's no doubt. In some ways, probably still plays a large role, right? But back in 16, I think things were a little bit different, right? We kind of had this, at least as it sits with digital marketing or destination marketing in general, we had kind of this emerging role of mobile at that time, right? We're getting, it was growing rapidly, but I think many destinations were still at that time adapting to a mobile first approach. That certainly changed as travelers are relying more and more on their smartphones. Certainly at that time, social media was becoming more prominent, right? It was still, I think, very much a one-way street for many DMOs that were more focused on broadcasting the content out there rather than maybe engaging in more meaningful ways like they do today. Data was important, but I think there was many limitations at that time around data collection. It was done through various channels at that time, like website analytics, email marketing, all that stuff. But it was done very siloed, right? Mm-hmm. At that time, many DMOs, I think, lacked a lot of the tools or even the knowledge at that time to create more individualized experiences that we would associate maybe with smart tourism. At the same time, I think SEO and paid search at that time were also still the dominant players in the space. They are still in many ways, but it's evolved a lot, especially with the growing importance of social media. And I think even at that time in 2016, there was very limited use of automation and personalizing content. Certainly, we recognize that early on with our Act-On integration and things of that nature. There was very limited use of AI. Some of the big players in the space, the Googles of the world, were experimenting or dabbling in those things. But it hadn't been brought to the forefront where we could do more smart segmentation and things of that nature. So that's kind of where things read in 2016.
I think that's a really interesting point you brought up. I mean, you focused in on the idea that as destinations, one of our strengths is we're broadcasters. We are a form of broadcasters, and it's a strength. And sometimes when you look in a modern world, it's a weakness. You say, how do we change that? So we're working on that. Do you think the idea of us broadcasting, and I'm going to put this question to you, Phil, when you're in 2016, you're looking at the destination organization, they have essentially a content curation and distribution model, but they're using a very broadcast model, to use Jason Swick's term, speaking to 1,000 people once. We have evolved to speaking to 1,000 people one at a time, especially when we're telling them bus schedules and stuff. I think also in 16, Jason, a good point is people weren't ready necessarily to be the other side of that equation and engage. So broadcasting worked. But do you think broadcasting and our role and function is something we've really sort of got to shift gears on? And I'll ask you first, Phil, and I'll let you think about it, Jason.
Yeah, I think this is the great question. I think it speaks to the core of the role of DMOs, right? In connecting the supply and demand of tourism, right? This is really a part of the critical question. For me, I think what is interesting going on in the tech world is that it kind of shifted from the traditionally way of looking at this is physical, this is digital, but now everything like can be merged together, right? There's now a creation of the virtual world, right? There's now a lot of you could call it robotics, AI based robotics, but what I'd better call it something like autonomous things, right? Because autonomous things are much broader, right? It's not just robotics, but it could be embedded systems, right? AI. And now if you look at experiences, right? We used to think tourism is experiencing, at the destination, but now there are emergences of travel-like experiences. This is something that is quite interesting when it comes to content, right? Content, of course, when we talk about content, is information, right? Yeah. There's information now, being created not just by human beings, but also by machines. So there's a lot going on. If you look at DMOs in terms of the role of content curation, content marketing, right? There are lots of questions we should be asking.
Well, and I probably led us down the path a little way on that. When I talked about broadcasting, I meant the idea of pushing large scale messages out. I think in 2016, it's really hard for us to shift gears and say, we're going to start to speak people one at a time. Yeah. Phil, you're working on the other side. You're actually literally at the data side saying, well, actually, that's how the data is useful, one person at a time. I probably should have put the question to you first, Jason. How's the mind shift from, if you're a massive tourism destination, you've still got great broadcast campaigns, but what's it like the shift towards actually engaging individuals, not just to sell them things anymore? What's it look like in destinations? What do you see?
Yeah, I think we have to do it just because of, the volatility and demand that we've seen, right, in the space, right? We have the volatility of demand that's certainly taken off. We're able to broadcast our messages or get our message out for our destinations on more channels than we ever have been before. We have to, at the same time, think about data privacy along the way. But, as marketers, I think we kind of did it to ourselves, right? One thing the marketers like, right? They like acronyms, right? As you know, right? SEO, CRO, a million other things. We love those type of things. We also like to take channels and just ruin them over time, right? And so, when you're an early adopter, it's easy to take a broadcast or a more broad approach because no one else is really in the space and you're going to be heard more. But that becomes noise over time because everybody starts to adopt those things. So I think, as we start to emerge into things now, starting to think about we're on this forefront of more, hyper-personalized landscape with tools like AI. Think about today's DMOs and what they're doing there, whether through chatbots or through other tools. I think that's helped. I think, if we're thinking about multi-channel or omni-channel experiences, destinations, I think now are more connected across these multiple channels, email, social, mobile apps that take a more personalized approach as we evolve into these types of things. So we don't, again, just become noise across that. It's interesting to have Phil here talking about a lot of this data stuff and some of the things they predicted because data has certainly evolved, data-driven decision-making. I would argue that's one of the most important factors in what I would call a digitally mature destination marketer, right? As we've had these huge advancements with big data analytics, which I think has, allowed DMOs to be much more detailed with those insights as they're formulating their strategies, whether that's, understanding where travelers are coming from, predicting maybe peak booking times so they can be more effective with those marketing, more targeted campaigns, things of that nature. And in doing that, we also have to think about, the rise of experiences around sustainability, which Phil touched on just a minute ago as well. There's this greater focus, certainly coming out of the pandemic, about curating unique local experiences and really connecting those travelers with the residents and their areas and creating the symbiotic relationship that way. And I think that's becoming a major theme in marketing, with more destinations, prioritizing environmentally conscious travel options, right?
So you are saying though that destinations, DMOs, and we see this, have shifted gears. They began to focus on the individual. In essence, like your statement about the incursion of tech into tourism, Phil, they started to focus on the individual because they could, and they're getting better at focusing on the individual, and not just in terms of messaging, but in terms of services and things. So this is where the whole idea of smart comes back in, which is you can serve me a fantastic message. Jason, do you think DMOs are getting ready to serve you a fantastic service as well as a message? Because you and I live in a world where we see lots of them shifting from marketing to management and asset development.
For sure.
How does, Phil, in your world, how does that data alignment happen? Because on paper, it's digital. In practice, it's about cities working with tourism organizations, working with universities. Is that a field of study at Virginia Tech? Like, the human side of this seems to be the piece that's, it's not lagging the technology, it's just not taking advantage of the technology to its highest level.
Yeah, I think, David, this is also a great point. I think the emphasis we place, yes, tools important, but what matters is really human beings, right? How we understand the world, right? How we understand the capacity and limitations of technology, and how we understand the capacity and limitations of ourselves. Now we're seeing kind of those boundaries are merging, because, as I mentioned earlier, there's AI systems now being embedded into whatever we do on a daily basis, right? We need to educate our students, and for DMOs, when it comes to data and analytics and driven, this remains the very critical component of their job, their kind of the say, if you want, the leadership in the destination management field, right? Both operationally and strategically. I believe it's really about understanding the capacity and limitations what we do, and we will come back to when we speak about AI on this.
Yeah. So let's stick a pin in this, and that's just one quick round. So where are we saying we are now as places and destinations in terms of being smart tourism? And then we'll move on to where we're going. So if you could sum it up, where are we now? I'd say we've come through disruption on the comms level. We're now applying, as Jay said, we're applying the lessons we learned in dealing with people as individual in comms, and we're starting to look at data as to how it can serve individuals, groups, or whatever in a different way. But certainly we're looking at data to serve us more. But that's up to us to figure it out. So that's my take on where we are now.
Yeah.
What do you say, Jason?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing, right? I think it's we're at this place now where technology and data have kind of caught up to like what we want to do to be able to deliver those experiences, right? I think we have access to more data than we ever have before. Those things were very fragmented before. They're still fragmented in a lot of ways, but we now have technology that's been emerging that's allowing us to be able to leverage that data, whether through AI with large data sets or whatever that may be, to create those experiences, and then connect. That technology's allowed us to connect that user's journey. Before, if you're marketing top, middle, or bottom of funnel, those things were super fragmented before. They're still very fragmented today, but we're evolving to be better, where we can, nurture that customer through all of those different stages of travel. It's getting better. DMOs are always going to struggle with that in some way, shape, or form, because they're not transactional in nature. They're more informational in nature. We're going to struggle with that for the time being, but technology is helping to bridge those gaps. So I think we're at the forefront of starting to see some of that technology and some of that data emerge.
Okay, so we've both got us at the starting line in good stead. Where do you see us right now, Phil? You're at school, you're teaching this, and I'm like most academic institutions, you're probably 4 or 5 years ahead of us in terms of theory.
Yes, I'm not sure about that, but we can't, for us, I think we're all students, right? We studied reality and try to understand what it really means. For DMOs, I can't help but thinking about, can someday AI, I'm trying to be a little bit provocative here, right? Replace DMOs, right? Destination marketing. Is that something that is going to happen? I have doubts. There's a possibility, for AIs to replace repetitive, routine-based kind of jobs, but still, for DMOs, it's really about understanding the culture, understanding, the how we can make sure people work together in terms of, projecting the right image to outside. So this is the big job, right? It's very intangible, right? It has a lot to do with the knowledge of local culture. But my my kind of the feeling, the AI is becoming a threat, right? AI is becoming better and better in understanding nuances in human culture and in, in our societies, in communities. This is something I fear for not just DMOs, tourism in general, but also for education, right, and in many other industry sectors as well. So we need to embrace this technology and trying to understand it better.
So thanks for that. So we're all in the same place. We've got this technology. It's disruptive, but we understand that in its essence of being disruptive, we know how to use it, but we don't know how to use it. So we're looking at the next 10 to 15 years of how do we marry the Internet of Things, smart centers that are connected to other smart centers to improve the lives of citizens and people and make great places to visit, great places to stay. It's obviously a parallel path. Data becomes more useful. You look at the convergence of tourism and civic infrastructure, it's obvious, especially as tourism is called upon more and more to be a force for good in destinations. It requires coordinating all that. In the terms of where we're going, I see a great future of the internet integration. As to the role and function of the destination organization, that's to be plumbed. But I still have a real sense that it's essential, because I don't see the idea of creating alignment around a sense of place being done by anybody else. It can be left into fragments, and that's okay. Then we'll have a nation of 5 million neighborhoods, because people organize into neighborhoods. But so this idea of identity is still really important. But I see where we're going. I'm trying to think about how the relationship in particular between destination organizations and civic entities or state entities or governing entities have to change, because that's where the data that affects tourism lives for the most part: schedules, travels, capacity, functional things like sustainability and water. So I look at those relationships and say, how do we build a better set of relationships between the citizens, the civic side, and the tourism side? Because data's here to do it for us and the tools are here, but now I see a human problem. That's my take on it. What about you guys?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a stab at that. And I think just building off of some of the things you said, David, around, and even what Phil said around, you know, it, keeping value, right? We have to be of value to our destination, right? If we're a value to the destination, we're certainly going to be value to the civic entities and everything else. Data makes that very possible, right? So as DMOs evolve, I think, long gone, I think, are the days of just, throwing up some marketing and hoping people come, taking credit for those things. We have to really start to change, because AI is making that change, right? It's like this wave is coming, right? And it's smart. Whether we like it or not, the market is going to do what the market is going to do. And so, if this wave is coming, be on the surfboard. Don't be the person drowning. Embrace it and find ways that you can take that. So as I think about this, I talked about this a little bit at our summit this year around, from where I'm sitting, right? DMOs really kind of becoming two different things, or at least destination marketing side of the organization becoming two things. Certainly, first off is being data aggregators, right? We have all this data right now that's important to us. We now live in this world of data warehouses and clean rooms and CDPs. These are terms that would have been unfamiliar to anyone even 12 months, 24 months ago, right? We didn't talk about these things. We didn't need to talk about these things at that time, because we never really measure our marketing beyond the click, right? So it was a world of impressions and things of that nature. But we are now, thinking about this world and how we have to do more so that we can tell the stories that we want. So we can go to the city, we can go to the residents and be able to tell the stories and the value of what a DMO brings. Certainly our business intelligence tool, at Simpleview, our data engine, right, which has a data warehouse component to it, brings all of your data into a place that allows for those types of things, right? This leads, I think, the way in forming more integrated marketing approaches, which historically have been, as I said earlier, very, very, very fragmented. So as we start to, market to our target audiences and generate demand and move users into a DMO's owned channels, right? Whether that's their website, whether that's their social channels. This allows them to be more strategic and have more alignment around those things. This means, as a data aggregator, I think DMOs need to think about the data that they own. Today, in my opinion, many DMOs lease their audiences, or they lease that data from others. Google Analytics, OTAs, whatever we want. If we're trying to reach a particular audience, we have to go lease this OTA's target audience or lease this provider's audience. I think DMOs, or at least what I feel best in class, are probably going to think of ways where they could start to collect that first party data, start to collect that demographic data, so they know and they own specifically what that traveler looks like to that destination, what the profiles of those travelers look like in the destination, what their best travelers look like for that destination. And then if they need to plug in through clean rooms or other things to others in the space, I think that's where it's at. So I think data aggregation is something that I'm seeing some DMOs explore more. I think that's where they need to evolve so that they become owners versus renters of that type of data. And then second, I think, is content publishers. DMOs have been that in some way, shape, or form, I think, for a long time. We've already evolved into that. But I think spearheading things like headless CMSs, right, which allows you to distribute your content not only to your own channels, but also anywhere that the content is important. So not just being able to push that content out towards a mobile app or your website, but being able to meet the market where it's at from a technology standpoint, whether folks are consuming those things on smartwatches or they're consuming it through augmented reality or things like Vision Pro through Apple. I think CMS allows us to then decouple that content from the front end and push that content to wherever it needs to be served for their audience. So to me, as we're starting to evolve and DMOs continue to show their value, embracing the change, embracing what's happening with AI and these other things. And to me, that takes thinking about data aggregation and how you can be the owner rather than renter of that data, and then content publishing. That certainly the website's going to be the most important thing, but how can I take that content and push that out to where I need to push it so I continue to create value for my organization? That's kind of where I see things.
Cool. So in the own versus operate, and let's face it, that's a really contentious thing. I mean,
Sure.
it can very much change. We owned our cell phones, now we rent them, and
Sure.
the market dynamics. So I wonder in 10 years if we try and own the data, because I start seeing the size of it and start more so owning the means of producing things from the data. That's a big question for me.
It is.
Phil, in your world, when you look forward to these integrated smart cities with tourism, do you immediately jump to best case sort of ideal scenario? We're working with a number of people in Europe on sustainability indexes. Those indexes are still very manual things that get compiled using data tools, of course. But in terms of implementing them, there's no sort of way to deliver value around, or they're still plumbing. Let me be fair. They're still plumbing the ways to deliver value from data like that. Do you see a world, 15 years out, or is it 20 years out, when the economic impact of a traveler coming into a destination, scored alongside their carbon footprint, is a really simple push button, not even a push button, automatic AI driven kind of thing? Or how close to that kind of world are we? Because that's one of the big ones. Can we measure impact? Can we measure regeneration? Can we start to measure the things we're talking about now? We can measure all the things we were talking about 20 years ago. Can you give me an impression? What was the response rate? Now we're talking about measure things that are in our new visions and strategies, being the most sustainable destination. Do we get there soon?
I have a hunch. I really don't have any evidence, but I think it's happening, regardless. Jason, probably you would agree with me. I have the sense of everything is being accelerated, right? It's happening so fast, and the landscape of technology actually has been shifting in the last 10, 20 years, and it's getting faster and faster. If you think about the channels, right? We used to have social media, but now Facebook and those things, but now it's TikTok, right? I have no idea. I have never used TikTok. I'm too old for that, right? So can you imagine, right? Things are happening that way. When it comes to AI, I think AI's capacity, of course, is the access to the oceans of data, right? This gives AIs the huge advantage in terms of understanding what is going on. The only limitation for me to think about is whether it has the access to the real-time data, right?
Mhm.
If that happens, I think AI will have that capacity to integrate everything together and to be able to come up with the meaningful, say, measures of sustainability, digital footprint in the coming years. So I don't know if it's 15 years. I probably be much shorter than that.
Do you see either of you out there right now just a great example? You can say this is an exemplary example. This is an exemplary situation where someone's using data differently. Is there one where you just either of you look at it and go, "Wow, that made me go wow"? Because I see lots of great data use and lots of smart use and lots of use the way we should have been using it 10 years ago to really crack away at two data sources, verifying them to, just to qualify something. But what do you see out there that inspires you right now? And because we've talked in fairly opaque terms about what that future looks like. What are you seeing, Jason? What are you working on that you love?
Yeah, looking out ahead, I'm not seeing a whole lot of crazy innovative ways that people are leveraging data today. I just think that they're embracing it more
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find ways to do that and connecting that across channels, right?
Mhm.
Again, it's less siloed, more connectivity, thinking about moving somebody towards what I would call the path to purchase. We're never going to have that fully because the DMO is typically going to hand that off to somebody else to complete that transaction, right? But I think DMOs nurturing those things have gotten much better, and data has helped with that. An example of that is, someone's coming in to the website or coming into the destination and being exposed to that for the first time, gets driven into their ecosystem, that we're not serving them high-level remarketing ads all the time that don't make sense, right? That they understand this person's already engaged with that brand, and now we need to explore a different way to move them to take action. Whether that's downloading an e-guide or whatever it may be. I think technology's helped with that, and I think data's helped with that. Certainly on that side, certainly AI's helped with those things. Those things would have been very manual before, and that's why they were fragmented. Somebody who maybe had already booked the trip was still getting, a lot of marketing around somebody who was in still the aspirational phase and didn't know what they wanted to do. I think technology's helped with serving the right message at the right time is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I'm totally there with you. Serving them and changing the way you approach them when it doesn't work. And again, that's where I see the
For
human,
sure. And AI
the
certainly helps.
human,
Mhm.
and we can really, and AI really needs the human touch in that one because the earliest sort of, it's not quite AI, it's just robocalling, but bad AI looks like robocalling.
It can.
Yeah.
It can also, I think, at times perform better than many humans because it can, to Phil's point about real time, it can process data a lot faster than we can, right?
For sure.
And understand in real time the user's behavior, what they're doing, their behaviors, and then adjust messaging accordingly.
Well, and it can do that when it's supervised and given a little bit. It can get better and better at that as long as you supervise it.
We're certainly not at a place where it's doing it
guidance.
autonomously.
Yeah.
AIs are now learning very fast, right?
Yes.
Because there's a feedback system. It's very interactive. Humans are generating new data, and that feeds into the AI verse, if you want. There's a universe of AIs now, right?
Yeah.
They're learning really, really quickly. This is the huge problem, and I feel in a couple of years maybe many things will get out of control. Of course, this is it's a fear shared by not just
Well, we
us,
can
but many.
we can do a whole podcast on just that, and I didn't know. I mean, let's say they're not calling it the most powerful single innovation since nuclear capabilities. It really is that. We get that, and as we move towards it, I always think about how do we prepare ourselves? How do DMOs prepare ourselves? And I come back to what you were talking about, Jason. We're essentially we're aggregators and we're storytellers. I do say in my work and discipline, we're very much having to take on a role in destination management, which I think is a misnomer. It doesn't mean managing the destination. It means playing a catalytic coordinating role so things don't get undone that are good and things that are good get done more. But when you look to that future, but the relationship between the city and the destination, the data has to become far more seamless, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll let you handle that, Phil.
I don't know, but anyways, I feel storytelling is a good word, right? It has been used for many years, but storytelling matters at both fronts. One, of course, the consumer side, right? You have to tell this compelling story to consumers, right? This is the destination. This is why it is attractive, that kind of stuff. But then there's the storytelling also within the community, right? DMOs need to have the good understanding what it was going on and come up with a compelling story. It's not just about proving the value of themselves, it's about the value of tourism, right? This is really a very significant job they need to do much better with data.
Wow, I'm so encouraged. The one of the leading voices in smart tourism reinforces the idea that as human beings, it's up to us whether or not we succeed. I'm thrilled with that message. I think it's a strong message. All right, so we're going to round it out here. It's been a kind of a whirlwind discussion. In a world that is doubly disrupted, where the beginning of these data alignments are just starting to happen, what do you both want to see? And I'll go with you, Phil, first, and I'll let you have the last word, Jason. What do you want to see happen in the next decade around how people look and think about data? And I'm saying this to you, people don't think about data. It's there and it's like oxygen. And I think we have to become more aware of it if we're going to use it, or else we're going to end up the same sort of conundrum we did with oxygen. When we're running out of it, we'll think, geez, we should have done that differently. So what do we need to be aware of?
Yeah, well, David, this is a great opportunity. For us to kind of talk about this together. I mean, in say 10, 15 years, I feel, as I said earlier, everything is being accelerated. I feel, AI will definitely, this is not just me, but many others, saying that this is going to happen to the tourism world, right? I hope that we don't regret, 10 years from now, not missing up opportunity to embrace AI. And Jason used the word symbiotic relationship. I think it matters more now in today's world, right? We have to actually live with, if you think about AIs, now they're like living things, right? Their entities are out there, they're constantly learning, and they're figuring out how to work with us, and we have to figure out how to work with them as well. So this is kind of my key takeaway from this conversation. I'm also based on my learning as well.
Yeah.
Jason, over to you.
Yeah, and David, you and I have talked about this a lot around, data for the sake of data's sake doesn't mean a lot, right? They're just numbers. Doesn't mean a lot if it's just sitting there, right? And this is kind of where I think many DMOs, in my experience, find themselves today is I'm gonna grab all the things and plug into all the things because I don't know, and I don't want to miss out on something, right? What really is important is getting that data, getting it into a place where you could observe that data, right? Whether that's through a data warehouse or collecting all that information someplace so you can query it. And then from an observation, how do I turn that into insights that lead to action? Those are very different things. And we often say data without thinking about the observation, insights, and action part of it. So as we're starting to evolve, I think we have to think about what questions do we want answered, right? And oftentimes when we're onboarding folks into some of our data tools or things of that nature, everybody wants it, but then when we ask what questions are you trying to get it to answer, that's I think a pain point that we see oftentimes. So I think it's thinking about, one is I need to get into a place collectively, so I'm not having to log into 25 different platforms. That's going to create a fragmented journey. How to get into one place so I can query and ask questions against that to get the answers back that I want to be able to get, so I can make the proper decisions. I think that's kind of like this point that we're in right now. We're just kind of in this early stage of thinking about, again, aggregating that data into a location so that I can query against it, because everything's in one spot. So I can ask those questions effectively, whether that's coming from C-suite or your day-to-day folks on the front lines. They need to be able to access that data and ask those questions, get those answers so they can make decisions. And I think that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, so wrapping it up then, we're on the starting line. We understand that data is important, and Phil, you see the infrastructure evolving, maybe even faster than we thought. The human side needs to keep up. But Jason, your advice is turn to your mission, turn to your strategy. What you're trying to do there will inform what you're needing to do with data.
You got it.
I love it. Thanks, guys.